Hello and welcome to Dynamics CRM 2011 Install and Customize series. Segment 6, Entities and Customizations. I'm Stephen No. I'm a senior consultant and trainer specializing in Dynamics CRM, and I've been working with CRM since version 3.0 came out back in 2005. I'll be your guide for this segment. On the agenda for this segment, we'll start off with the concepts about entities, do a little customization and renaming of entities. We'll create an entity. We'll go ahead and delete a custom entity. And then we'll spend some time going through the CRM system solution entities, also known as the out-of-box entities, and talk about what special support Microsoft has built into the box to help you understand which entities you might want to reuse within the CRM system solution versus creating from new. And finally, we'll end up with the resources slide. The purpose of this segment is to be able to relate entities to the SQL database and understand the limitations imposed by SQL 2008. To be able to update and rename existing entities. To be able to handle the new entity creation process and understand all the options that you must choose and when you must choose them. To be able to delete a custom entity. And finally, to be able to determine when to use an out-of-box entity versus creating a new custom entity in your projects. So let's get started. We'll begin with CRM 2011 entity concepts. Entities are CRM implementations of files or tables in the database. It's been abstracted because under the covers in the SQL database, every entity is actually multiple tables, not just one. The schema is defined in CRM, not SQL. You can use customization user interface or you can use SDK methods, but anything in creating attributes and entities in CRM is done through the CRM interface, not in SQL. The CRM schema is stored as metadata in the database, and the database in SQL is accessed by the organization name _MSCRM. CRM uses the metadata to manage the SQL tables directly, which is why you should never be altering the tables. Direct changes to the SQL database structure are, as Microsoft puts it, unsupported. It does not mean that you can't go in and change data in the database. However, you had best know what you're doing, and it's certainly not supported by Microsoft except in very specific circumstances. And finally, within entities, the data elements inside them are known as attributes. There's a number of entities that are included in the base CRM application. Basically, these are designed to support sales, marketing, service, and scheduling. And all of these entities are considered to be part of a managed system solution. Now that will be covered in much more detail in another segment. However, it's important to understand that managed solutions have restrictions on them that prevent us from being able to make as many changes as unmanaged ones. We can change many of the out-of-box entity display names, but we cannot delete any of the out-of-box entities. So we can create custom entities to store additional information. And once we've created a custom entity, we can go back and delete it as long as it's not part of a managed solution. Once we've created an entity, we cannot change the schema name. We can change, however, the display name and the plural name, and we can change some other properties. Now let's talk for a moment about the impact of SQL 2008 on CRM entities. Since CRM is based upon SQL 2008 64-bit server, we have to keep in mind that the restrictions of SQL will always affect CRM. Entities are actually stored in two tables in SQL. The first table will be the entity name base, which contains all of the data elements created by CRM as part of creating that entity, and also for all of the out-of-box entities that are included as part of the system solution. All the data elements are included there. The data elements or attributes that we add to a CRM entity are stored in the extension base table. We are subject to the SQL limitations, as I mentioned before, so we're using SQL field types that map to our CRM data types covered in the attributes segment. The maximum number of fields per table in SQL is 1024. And basically what that means is, since we must have the key to the record in the extension base table, that leaves 123 attributes that we can add to that table. We're also limited to a maximum size per row of 8,060 bytes. Again, this is a SQL limitation. It also excludes the multiple lines of text attribute type, which is stored as nvarchar max, and this type of data is excluded from the maximum size per row of 8,060 bytes, and it's stored in the database in a completely different way. So now let's take a look of the SQL view of the CRM 2011 database. I wanted to take a minute or two just to familiarize you with what happens in the SQL database underneath the covers. Now remember, you're not supposed to go in and directly alter the database yourself unless you really know what you're doing, because it's absolutely unsupported as far as Microsoft is concerned. However, what I wanted to do was just to let you take a look real quickly to understand what the structure is that's created underneath. So at this point, take a look at the files in the database of account base and account extension base. Account base contains all of the out-of-box attributes that are part of the account entity. And so if we scroll through here, you'll see there's a lot of fields in place. Some of them are foreign keys, and so on. And this represents all the data elements that are included out of the box with the account entity. The account extension base entity, on the other hand, only has a single column, which is the account ID. This is because this is an unmodified organization, and we have not created any custom entities, nor have we created any custom attributes. Therefore, in the account extension base, the single field, the account ID, is in place, but there's nothing else there. It's just waiting for us to add new attributes to CRM. CRM 2011 entity ownership options are designed to facilitate security for different entities. Basically, there's some entities that are used by all users, such as the product structure. There's other entities that have the need for individual ownership of records, such as opportunities, where you want to assign opportunities to individual sales reps. So the option in the entity creation supports the concept of individual ownership to allow records to be secured based upon the owner and the owner's business unit. In this case, the individual records are owned by users or teams. Organizational ownership, on the other hand, permits no individual ownership of records, and records are owned by the organization itself. So the security options for read, write, update, and so on permit only none or all. This comes in very handy to make security easier. CRM 2011 Entity Types and Solutions. The type and managed solution status of any given entity determine what customizations are possible. There's a base system solution that is a managed solution that's included with CRM out of the box. Almost all the entities in that managed solution are configured to be customizable by Microsoft. On the other hand, there's a few non-customizable entities in the out of box. Those do not support any changes whatsoever. A quick overview of managed solutions is that managed solutions are actually exported from another organization of CRM and imported into an organization that you may be working on. A managed solutions options as to what can be customized are actually set before the export of the solution, long before it's imported into the system that you're working with. In that situation, managed solutions can lock customization options. Now the details are found under the solution topics, and we're not going to get into that here. Then finally, there's unmanaged solutions. And basically, with an unmanaged solution, that you have full access to all customization options. Not only that, it's good to understand that unmanaged solutions are the types of customizations that you do every day. If you make changes on a system, by default, those changes are unmanaged until they are packaged as part of a solution and exported with the managed solution switch set. So any customizations made on the organization that you're working in would be unmanaged and subject to additional customization. Customizing CRM 2011 entities. Customizing existing entities is possible, and most out-of-box entities, part of the base system solution, can be customized to match existing terminology for an organization. So for instance, we could rename the account entity to be the company entity, or the case entity to be known as incident or ticket. We could change the name of quote to estimate. We can also go in and rename the attributes as far as the display names are concerned, but certainly not the schema names. We can also alter or add forms, views, and charts, and etc. Now this is covered in subsequent topics, but it's good to know what you can and cannot do within customizing an existing entity. In general, this type of customization to the out-of-box entities provides a more intuitive user interface and reduces training requirements for end users. Of course, we can carry these techniques further and use it to customize previously created custom entities, which offer even more options for customization. One of the things that we need to be considering is the concept of creating a new entity versus repurposing or reusing existing entities. We might want to consider repurposing or using an existing entity when this entity is very similar to the existing purpose that we're trying to accomplish, and possibly when the business model of the organization is different from the CRM model as distributed out of the box. There's a lot of entities in the base system solution, and they can be repurposed if you're certain that, number one, it'll never be needed for its intended purpose, which is to say that Dynamics CRM might have enhanced functioning capability that's been designed that goes beyond what typical customizations can do. So in many cases, we don't want to override those features and functions which may be needed somewhere else in the system. Later in this segment, we go through the enhanced processing functions that are supported by the out-of-the-box entities and try and give you an overview of how you would understand what each one is designed for and what additional functions are there. Basically, the rule is this. If you're seriously in doubt as to whether you should create a new entity or repurpose an existing one, you probably should go ahead and create a new entity. If you're certain that an entity will never be used in the function it was originally designed for, and that you can get around whatever additional processing has been put in place for it, then go ahead. You can reuse entities in that case. All right, so let's take a moment and talk about the steps required to rename an entity, because there's a little bit more to it than just changing the name. We're going to get into this in our demonstration momentarily, but just want to go through the steps. Typically, the easiest way to show a change of name in the user interface is to change the display name and plural name. While that will affect the menu system, it does not necessarily affect the labels that are on the entity form, and it certainly won't change the names of the views that the users are looking at when they're selecting views, and it doesn't change the names of attributes or any relationships to related entities. Finally, we also need to consider the system messages, any reports that we've done, and even possibly whether or not we need to update the help content to reflect the new name that we've put in place. It's been my experience to do this manually that it takes about 1 hour to go through and change all the different places that something might need for a rename. It ends up being about 60 minor modifications. There are some tools that can help you do a scan replace and change the names and certainly simplify a lot of this, but I have not been able to find these available on CRM 2011 as of yet. So now let's go ahead and take a look at actually customizing an entity. We're looking at the default solution, which is where many of the changes take place when we're customizing CRM. And we're going to drill down into entities, and we're going to take a look at the account entity. So, if we go and take a look at the fields on the screen, you'll see that some of them are grayed out. Obviously, anything that's grayed out cannot be changed. In any case, what we're able to accomplish is to go in and change the name of the account to company, and accounts to companies. I also can go back and change the description if I need to. Now down in the communications and collaboration options, everything has been enabled except for queues. However, we can still turn on and off document management, and we still can enable queues. But if you notice, with these little marks beside them, anything that is marked in this way cannot be changed once it's enabled. So since these were previously enabled, this is no longer able to be changed. Up here in the areas that display this entity, what you'll see is that it's grayed out as well. This would not be the case in a custom entity, but it is locked down on the system solution. Finally, down at the bottom, we can turn it on and off the Outlook and Mobile options for Mobile Express and Reading Pane in CRM for Outlook, but the offline capability for CRM for Outlook has been locked out. So this is an example of the things that we could change. And typically when we make these kinds of changes, we want to first of all do a save, and after the screen refresh, then click Publish to make this change available to all users of the system. Publishing is a key component in customization. Typically you can work on a set of customizations and then publish them when you're ready to expose the entire set of customization to your end users. However, if another user is customizing in the system and does a publish all customizations, then anything you're working on will be published at that point. So you should be careful in using the publish all option. I have now brought up the CRM 2011 screen that shows the account entity, and you'll notice it has not been renamed. This is because this browser window was already open when the publish took place, and so what I need to do is to refresh the browser window using F5 for instance, or exit the browser and re-enter before the name change will become apparent on the screen. That's not necessarily true of other customizations that you do inside of CRM, but any name changes, for them to be reflected within the menu, will need a refresh of the browser itself.